Why does history repeat itself? Why do civilizations rise, flourish, and then collapse only to be replaced by another? Wars, revolutions, golden ages, and dark ages seem to follow one another in an endless cycle. But what if these are not random accidents of history? What if humanity itself is evolving through deeper stages of consciousness, and each stage shapes the way we think, govern, create, and even worship? This is the radical insight of Sri Aurobindo's masterpiece, The Human Cycle. Written over a century ago, it offers a map of human evolution, not just biological or technological evolution, but the evolution of our inner being. Aurobindo shows us that societies are reflections of our collective psychology, and that history itself is a story of consciousness unfolding. In this video, we'll dive into the key teachings of the human cycle. We'll explore how civilizations pass through symbolic, conventional, rational, and subjective phases, and why Aurobindo believed humanity is now preparing for a spiritual or gnostic future. We'll look at how religion, education, art, politics, and economics change as consciousness evolves, and why the tension between individual freedom and collective unity holds the secret to humanity's next step. Let's begin with the psychology of social stages that shapes the destiny of civilizations. 1. The psychology of social stages. Aurobindo proposes that civilizations pass through a series of dominant stages, each characterized by a distinct inner attitude toward life. Symbolic. Early societies live close to the rhythms of nature. Their rituals, myths, and art operate through symbols that represent cosmic realities: sun and moon, Mother Earth, seasonal cycles. Social cohesion is shaped by a sense of sacred presence in the world. The authority of elders, priest-kings, and customs arises less from argument and more from resonance with a felt order. Typal or conventional. As societies expand, they codify behavior. Law, caste, class, and convention define roles. The primary value is stability. Religion becomes orthodoxy. Ethics becomes rule-based. Art is regulated by canons, and education in culture's conformity. The individual is significant insofar as he or she fits the type. The cost of stability is rigidity. Individualistic and rational. A revolt against rigid forms elevates the individual and the faculty of reason. The Renaissance and Enlightenment epitomize this shift. Law becomes rights-based, education fosters curiosity and method, art turns subjective and experimental, and politics leans toward democracy and pluralism. The gains are innovation, liberty, and critique of superstition. The risks are atomization, skepticism, and a purely utilitarian materialism. Subjective or psychic turn. When reason reaches its limits, solving many problems yet unable to resolve humanity's deeper unease, society turns inward. This subjective age seeks authenticity, integral well-being, and spiritual meaning. Psychology, self-culture, and universal values start to shape institutions. At its best, this prepares the passage to a spiritualized culture. At its worst, it can devolve into vague sentimentalism or cult of emotion. Spiritual or Gnostic. The final aim is not an escape into otherworldliness, but a transformation of life by a higher consciousness. Here, the spiritual is not an institution or dogma, but a living realization that informs reason, emotion, and action. A Gnostic society would harmonize individuality and collectivity, freedom and order, matter and spirit, not by compromise, but by a greater unity that includes difference. Two principles govern the movement across these stages. No stage is purely discarded. Each contains partial truths. The symbolic preserves reverence. The conventional preserves order. The rational preserves liberty. The subjective preserves depth. The spiritual must enlist, purify, and integrate them. Shifts are driven by inner necessity, external crisis. War, famine, technological disruption serve as catalysts, but the decisive factor is the ripening of consciousness. When the inner poise no longer matches outer forms, change becomes inevitable. 2. From the infrarational to the rational, to the superrational. Aurobindo distinguishes three overarching modes of human mentality: infrarational or subrational. Life is governed by habit, impulse, and unexamined tradition. This is not a judgment of worth. The infrarational can sustain community and lend stability, but it resists innovation and demands conformity. Rational. Reason interrogates tradition. It posits universal principles, values evidence, and seeks coherent systems. Constitutions, scientific method, contractual law. Reason emancipates, but also creates its own orthodoxy when it insists on being the sole arbiter of truth. It tends to reduce reality to what is measurable and discursive. Superrational, or spiritual intuitive. Beyond intellect lies a faculty of direct insight, unity awareness, and integral knowledge. Aurobindo does not reject reason. He assigns it a noble but limited role. Reason orders and clarifies. Intuition reveals and transforms. The superrational is not anti-rational mysticism. It is a higher reason, luminous and comprehensive, capable of holding complexity without fragmentation. The pivotal teaching is that human progress is ultimately a growth in consciousness, and that each mode of mentality builds on the previous. The rational must first humanize the infrarational, then consent to be uplifted by the superrational. When reason resists this ascent, societies suffer an exhaustion of purpose, technocratic competence without meaning, pluralism without cohesion, freedom without fulfillment. The cure is not a retreat to past certainties or a plunge into irrationalism, but a forward movement to a wider light. 3. Individual and collective, from conflict to integration. Civilization swings between two poles. Collectivism, the social whole is supreme. Strengths, solidarity, shared purpose, public welfare. Risks, suppression of dissent, stagnation, tyranny of the norm. Individualism, the person as inviolable center of rights and self-direction. Strengths, innovation, freedom, dignity. Risks, isolation, competitive egotism, cultural fragmentation. Aurobindo's vision is not a middle-of-the-road compromise, but an integration at a higher plane. In a spiritualized society, the individual realizes a deeper self that is universal in essence, the psychic or soul center, while the collective becomes an association of such self-finding individuals. The true community is not built by coercion or pure contract, but by a shared inner aspiration. 3 practical implications follow. Institutions must foster self-discovery. Education, art, and religion should awaken the inner being. not just transmit information or enforce conformity. Freedom and responsibility deepen together. Liberty without inner discipline becomes license. Duty without inner consent becomes servitude. The spiritual solution is a liberty aligned with the good of all because it springs from unity awareness. Leadership transforms into service. Authority remains necessary, but its center of gravity shifts. Leaders are tasked to facilitate the flowering of many selves into a harmonious whole. 4. The transformation of culture under shifting consciousness. A central contribution of the human cycle is its analysis of how key cultural domains evolve. In each domain, Aurobindo tracks a passage from convention to reason to spirituality. Religion. Conventional phase. Religion is bound to dogma, ritual, and social control. It is valuable in preserving reverence and community, but tends to stifle inquiry and diversity. Rational phase. Critique exposes superstition and abuses of power. Ethics become central. Theology yields to moral universalism or secular humanism. Yet reason alone cannot satisfy the soul's hunger for transcendence. Spiritual phase. Religion becomes spirituality, an experiential realization. Many paths are recognized as valid. The test is transformation of consciousness and life. The outer forms remain, but they serve an inner light. This phase aims at unity of religions without uniformity. A religion of humanity, grounded in living truth rather than sectarianism. Ethics and law. Conventional, rule-based morality enforces social order. Law is external, punitive, and hierarchical. Rational, rights, consent, and equality emerge. Law becomes procedural and universal. Ethics emphasizes autonomy and human dignity. Spiritual, ethics becomes self-norming through inner awakening. The highest law is the law of one's realized nature, aligned with universal good. This does not eliminate external law, but transfigures it. Justice becomes restorative and purposive, not merely retributive. Art and aesthetics. Conventional. Art serves tradition, religion, court, or tribe. It is standardized and ceremonial. Rational individual. Art expresses the artist's unique sensibility. Movements proliferate, styles experiment, the subjective gains primacy. Spiritual. Art becomes a vehicle of revelation, making the invisible felt through form, rhythm, image, and sound. This is not didactic art, but transfigurative. It enlarges perception, heals fragmentation, and hints at deeper harmony. Education. Conventional. Education reproduces types and trains obedience. Rational. Education cultivates critical thinking, scientific method, and civic competence. Spiritual. Education seeks integral development. Body, life energy, mind, heart, and soul. The teacher becomes a guide to self-formation. The aim is not a profession alone, but a person poised for continuous inner growth and social contribution. Economics and work. Conventional. Economy aligns with status and tradition. Guilds and castes regulate function. Rational. Capitalism, socialism, and mixed systems compete, each emphasizing efficiency, equity, or planning. Markets and states become the primary instruments. Spiritual. The question shifts from how much can we produce and consume to what kind of life are we producing. Work becomes a field of self-offering and creativity. Enterprise aligns with human flourishing and ecological integrity. Ownership and coordination are redesigned to harmonize initiative with solidarity. Cooperatives, purpose trusts, stakeholder governance, and gift-oriented circuits can all become vehicles of a higher ethic. The state and the international order. Conventional. Authority is monarchical or theocratic. The aim is stability and defense. Rational. The modern nation-state, constitutionalism, and democracy arise. International institutions emerge to manage interdependence, but national ego often dominates. Spiritual. The state becomes a servant of human growth, not an idol of power. Political forms are less important than the consciousness animating them. Internationalism deepens from transactional alliances to a unity in diversity. Cultures retain their genius while participating in a wider human purpose. Five. Democracy, aristocracy, and the law of social evolution. Aurobindo treats political forms historically rather than dogmatically. Every form, democracy, aristocracy, monarchy, can be constructive or destructive depending on the consciousness behind it. Monarchy, at its best, symbolizes unity and continuity. At its worst, it devolves into autocracy and stagnation. Aristocracy can protect standards of excellence. It easily hardens into privilege detached from purpose. Democracy advances equality and participation. It can dissolve into factionalism, short-termism, and the tyranny of opinion. The law of social evolution he proposes is that no form guarantees the good. The same constitution can be luminous or lifeless in different ages. What matters is the soul of the society, its dominant aspiration, its openness to growth, and its willingness to reconcile freedom with solidarity. Therefore, the solution to political crisis is not merely structural tinkering. It is an education of consciousness at scale. 6. The subjective turn and its perils. Aurobindo foresaw the rise of a subjective age seeking authenticity, wellness, and inner exploration. He welcomed this turn as a needed counterbalance to materialism, but he warned of two pitfalls. Egoistic subjectivism. The inner life becomes a playground for self-indulgence, relativism, or escapist spirituality. Society then fragments into private cults of preference without a shared center. Collective psychologism. Institutions adopt therapeutic language without deeper transformation, converting spirituality into a tool of conformity or productivity. The corrective is a disciplined spirituality, practice, discernment, and service. Authentic subjectivity discovers a deeper-than-ego self that naturally seeks unity with others. This inner anchor allows pluralism without relativism and freedom without alienation. 7. Education for the next stage. If the future depends on consciousness, then education is the master lever of social evolution. Aurobindo's principles for transformative education include integral development, cultivate body, health, skill, poise, life energy, vitality, character, mind, knowledge, reason, creativity, heart, empathy, aesthetic sense, and soul, aspiration, silence, purpose. Self-discovery. Help students find the psychic being or inner guide. Methods include contemplative practices, reflective journaling, service learning, and arts. Freedom with guidance. Provide latitude for exploration, framed by mentoring and ethical orientation. Discipline is internalized, not imposed. Contextual knowledge. Science, humanities, and vocational skills remain essential, but are taught as instruments of integral living and service. Teacher formation. Educators cultivate their own inner growth. The teacher's consciousness carries more formative power than any curriculum. Such education is not a luxury. For Aurobindo, it is the condition of a viable democracy and a humane global order. 8. Religion of humanity and unity in diversity. Aurobindo often uses the phrase religion of humanity, not to propose a new sect, but to indicate a spiritual ethos honoring the divine in every person and culture. Its marks. Universality without uniformity. It recognizes many valid spiritual paths and cultural expressions. The unity is in essence the diversity in form. Service as worship. Compassion, justice, and creative work are expressions of the inner realization. Inner authority. The ultimate appeal is not to external authority or majority opinion, but to the inner light tested by reason, experience, and fruits in life. Unity in diversity is not a slogan for Aurobindo. It is a spiritual law. True unity enhances difference instead of erasing it. Conversely, difference rooted in separative ego produces conflict. A gnostic society would harmonize languages, arts, sciences, and faiths as complementary powers of one evolving spirit. 9. Crisis as catalyst. Aurobindo interprets wars, revolutions, and social breakdowns as symptoms of a deeper misfit between consciousness and form. Economic systems that maximize output but ignore inner welfare. Political systems that champion rights but neglect solidarity. Religious systems that protect tradition but stifle the soul. These contradictions ripen into crisis. Crisis, however, is not merely destructive. It can be catalytic, compelling societies to reassess their organizing values, open to new syntheses that reconcile freedom with community, shift from competitive rivalry to collaborative creativity, adopt institutions capable of sustaining inner and outer well-being. The vital question in any crisis is not, how do we restore the old normal? But what mutation of consciousness is now demanded? 10. The Gnostic Society. Aurobindo's future vision. The most distinctive teaching of the human cycle is Aurobindo's vision of a Gnostic society, a community shaped by higher consciousness. Its features include psychic centering. Individuals live from the soul, not merely the surface mind or vital desires. This yields a natural ethic, truthfulness, goodwill, self-mastery, because one experiences others as extensions of a shared essence. Integral knowledge. Education and culture integrate reason with intuition, science with spirituality. Knowledge is not hoarded, but shared as commonwealth. Creativity is oriented to human flourishing and planetary stewardship. Transformative work. Economic life is reimagined around purpose, beauty, sustainability, and service. Ownership and incentives align with collective well-being. Innovation arises from a widened consciousness, not only from competition. Servant leadership. Authority functions through insight, competence, and trust rather than coercion. Governance is dynamic and adaptive. Decisions are informed by data, deliberation, and inner discernment. Global solidarity. Nations retain culture and autonomy, yet act from awareness of shared destiny. International institutions evolve from power balancing to conscious coordination in health, ecology, knowledge, and peace. Culture of beauty. Art, environment, and daily life become expressions of harmony. Beauty is not decoration, but a mode of truth that refines sensibility and uplifts collective atmosphere. Aurobindo is clear. Such a society cannot be engineered by decree. It requires a critical mass of transformed individuals whose presence reconfigures institutions from within. Still, preparatory steps are possible now. Integral education, contemplative cultivation, new economic forms, intercultural dialogue, and experiments in community that embody unity and diversity. 11. Practical pathways, from ideal to experiment. To bridge vision and practice, Aurobindo suggests an experimental approach. Pilot communities and institutions. Schools, enterprises, and civic bodies can test integral principles. Shared ownership models, restorative justice, contemplative curricula, and arts-infused public spaces. Layered governance. Maintain democratic procedures while introducing spaces for informed consensus and deeper reflection. Citizens' assemblies, deliberative polling, and councils that integrate data with values. Ethic of growth. Measure success by qualitative indicators alongside GDP. Health, learning, social trust, ecological balance, and cultural vitality. Plural spirituality. Encourage freedom of conscience while cultivating practices. Silence, service, study, and creative work that foster inner poise and mutual goodwill. These are not blueprints of lines of force. Societies advance by iterating structures that embody higher consciousness more consistently. 12. Critique and balance, guardrails for ascent. Aurobindo's vision invites objection. Is a spiritualized society realistic? Are appeals to higher consciousness naive in a world of power politics? He answers by reframing the question. The choice is not between idealism and realism. It is between shallow realism that manages symptoms and deep realism that addresses root causes: human egoism, fear, ignorance, and fragmentation. Nevertheless, the human cycle contains its own guardrails. No bypass of reason. Intuition must be tested, articulated, and operationalized. Science and law remain indispensable. No theocracy. Spirituality must not become a tool of control. Pluralism and rights are safeguarded as expressions of the deeper unity. No utopian fixation. The future is emergent. Humility and adaptability are essential. Progress is uneven and reversible. Setbacks are teachers, not proofs of impossibility. No denial of matter. Spirituality affirms body, earth, and labor. The aim is transformation, not flight. These guardrails keep aspiration grounded, preventing the superrational from being swallowed by irrationalism or authoritarianism. 13. Rereading history through Aurobindo's lens. Aurobindo's schema offers a new way to read history. The ancient symbolic civilizations preserved cosmic attunement. Their downfall came from rigidity and internal fracture. The medieval conventional era conserved order, but often suppressed inquiry. The modern rational epoch unlocked science, rights, and global exchange, while incubating alienation, ecological strain, and spiritual hunger. The emerging subjective turn. Psychology, mindfulness, holistic health, social entrepreneurship signals a search for integration beyond material progress alone. The question for our time is whether the subjective turn will mature into a conscious spiritualization or regress into either cynical materialism or scattered mysticisms. Aurobindo's wager is that humanity is ripening toward a greater synthesis. 14. The inner discipline behind social evolution. Aurobindo never lets us forget that society is people, aggregates of inner poises. The decisive leverage point is therefore self-culture. Attention and silence train the mind to perceive from a wider field. Aspiration orients energy to the true, the beautiful, the good. Equality, in his sense, is an inner evenness that prevents agitation from dictating action. Work as yoga converts everyday tasks into vehicles of growth. Surrender, not passivity, opens the being to a greater consciousness that can guide and transform. The fruit of this discipline is not private salvation, but public transformation. As individuals grow, institutions they inhabit inevitably change, first subtly, then visibly. The human cycle thus spirals upward through personal and collective evolution. The human cycle offers a map and a challenge. The map shows how civilizations evolve by inner shifts, symbolic to conventional to rational, to subjective to spiritual, and how every domain of culture reflects the dominant poise of consciousness. The challenge is twofold. First, to recognize the limits of the rational age without discarding its gains. Second, to catalyze the emergence of a spiritual or gnostic society by transforming ourselves and our institutions. In practical terms, the book urges us to build integral education that cultivates knowledge, character, creativity, compassion, and inner poise. Reimagine economics and work as arenas of purpose and service, incorporating forms of ownership and coordination that align initiative with common good. Renew law and politics with a spirit that balances rights and responsibilities, reason and insight, national cultures, and global solidarity. Foster arts and public spaces that attune the senses to harmony and widen perception. Encourage plural spiritual practice, not enforced creeds, but living traditions and experiments that humanize power and heal fragmentation. Aurobindo does not predict an inevitable golden age. He sketches the conditions for a higher synthesis and invites deliberate effort. The human cycle can loop in repetition or spiral upward. The hinge is consciousness, its clarity, breadth, and depth. If humanity consents to grow beyond the ego and harness the higher ranges of mind and spirit, then freedom, equality, and fraternity, so long aspirational, can become realized principles embedded in our personal lives and shared institutions. In that sense, the human cycle is less a philosophy of history than a program of inner work for outer transformation. Its promise is not escape from the world, but the transfiguration of life. A civilization where unity deepens diversity, power serves compassion, knowledge illumines purpose, and the ordinary becomes luminous with a greater truth.